Uh, Probably one of the first U.S. Westerns was done by Edison in 1898, and it was a scene in a saloon. Didn't even run a minute in length. Edison then did a series of movies, became very famous, and by 1912 we had our first movie studio open here, which was a Lubin. They were headquartered in Philadelphia in a suburb called Bellwood. They had a huge glass studio. In the early days, they had to rely on sunlight for all of their lighting. The studio here in Prescott was under the direction of Romaine Fielding, a very avant-garde filmmaker for his time. He made 15 movies here. His studio was behind Mercy Hospital, which is now Prescott College, on Western Avenue. He rented a home there for his offices, his wardrobe department, those sort of things, and built an outdoor platform that had moving canvas sides. And they would paint interiors on the canvas, and while shooting, they could be moving where they were shooting, since the canvas was movable, and track the sunlight. Far as I have found, they had no movie set built there. And he basically made movies such as about the strike of the miners in Jerome, a forest ranger's life, a soldier's life, the invasion of southern Arizona by Pancho Villa. And unfortunately, none of these movies exist. I do have and have seen a very limited number of stills from the movie, such as The Cringer. And he starred in all of his own movies, and he had, just like John Ford did, a stock company of actors. So in 1912, basically, if you see a movie with him, Robin Adair, or Mary Ryan, you're seeing a movie that was made here, except they no longer exist. Then he moved his studio to New Mexico. And William Selleck sent out, under the direction of William Duncan, to open a studio here. And he just moved in to the vacated Lubin studio. However, they built a Western town set, a very small one. The actual buildings were not full-sized. And it's very obvious. They had a sheriff's office, a general store, and a barber shop. And when you have the cast members standing next to them, they look tiny. Well, that was in 1913. William Duncan had the foresight to hire an almost unknown by the name of Tom Mix to play villains, Mexicans, and Indians to Duncan's heroes. Kind of interesting, you may have heard the canard that Mix owned Yavapai Hills and the ranch there. Well, in 1959, his third wife wrote a book entitled The Fabulous Tom Mix. And she has some pages in there about their trip to Prescott and where they lived. And she really wrote it up because they had been living out of suitcases in hotels across the country. Especially Mix got his start in jungle movies in Florida, and then made some in Oklahoma, where in 1910 he was noticed because he bulldogged a steer in the movie. And no one had ever done that before. So when they got to Prescott, Selleck had rented them an actual home, a house, to live in downtown. And so she wrote about that. And of course, they were basically destitute. They had no money. They couldn't afford to buy a ranch. Mix played, for instance, an Apache to the hero played by William Duncan in a movie titled An Apache's Gratitude. This is 1913. Does anyone have any guesses as to what the Apache's name might be? I'll give you a hint. There's a local road as you head to Skull Valley of the same name. So my guess is that's where they got the name, which then became famous in a serial in 1938 and super famous on TV in 1949. Tonto. Well, Selleck thought there was something in Mix, so in 1914, he sent him to their LA studios, one of which was in Edendale, which is now Echo Park. And Mix studied under the only feature film director that Selleck had, which was Colin Campbell. And he did make several shorts there, short being a 1 or 2 reel movie. A reel of 35 millimeter is approximately 10 minutes. And the vast majority of the movies in the early 1910s were 1 or 2 reelers and occasionally a half reel, where on one reel they would have 2 different movies.